Hello, welcome back to the Your Everyday Strength podcast. My name is Josh Sternberg, and if you are just joining us for the very first time today, thank you very much for being here. If, however, you are returning, again, thank you very much for being here. You've been listening to my voice for some time now. If you're watching this on YouTube, then you will notice we have a guest today. If you're not, well, there you go. Surprise is spoiled. We do have a guest. We have Mitch Hunter of Hunter Healing. He's come to have a bit of a chat with us today, and I already know for sure that there's going to be a fair bit of value packed into this.
Yeah, hopefully.
So we'll see. First things first, Mitch. Would you like to introduce yourself to the audience? Give them a little bit of a, brief summary, the resume of who you are, what you do.
Yeah. So my name's Mitch. A business I have is called Hunter Healing. So we work with people, teaching them meditation to help them to really kind of work with chronic pain and chronic illness. And then there's also, that's one arm of the business. And the other arm of what we do is helping people to connect very deeply to spirituality and find like a inner state of peace and quiet that's within the tradition that I teach within. So, I went through a long journey from being a physiotherapist to a university lecturer to really deep diving within meditation to, a very high degree over many, 25 years or so. I reached a point where I reached a kind of stabilized awakening, which is kind of, you can kind of highlight it and find it within different texts within traditions, like meditative traditions. But it basically meant that I was transitioning from then being a university lecturer into the work I do now. So it's been a pretty wild kind of journey, but it's meant that now the work I can do with people is really, really specific, and particularly those who have a spiritual inclination or like spiritually seeking, I can offer a really unique service that not many people can really find. Yeah.
You mentioned in there, you said we a few times. So
Yeah.
within Hunter Healing as a whole, is that just a company and then you're a part of it and you've got other people working with you, or is it?
It's myself and my wife.
Okay, perfect.
So she comes from a tech background, and then she also is a permaculture designer. And so she's very much about like holistic living, and she brings that element to the business. And then I come from this kind of, deep meditation background. So that's the kind of side that I bring to it. And at the moment, we're more focused towards a meditative point of view, but in the future, it will be just about holistic lifestyles. Yeah.
Yep. And within that, you kind of briefly touched on it. And I know I've heard an episode about you before and you discussed sort of your actual history and the transition between different things. But you mentioned that you were a physio and also a university lecturer, which is obviously very like systemized, structured, tertiary education, that kind of thing. And then slowly, as you've shifted into more of this holistic spirituality side of things, how did that transition occur, or where was it throughout that? Because I've done university, I've gone and did exercise science, and I was studying my master's in EP and things like that as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of know how the tertiary education is structured and how rigid it is. And then as I've dove a lot deeper into more of the spirituality side and the holistic side of things, I'm like see a bit of a stark contrast. So give us a little bit of an insight into just all of those things for you.
Yeah. Well, I think you're right. Hey, I mean, like the tertiary education is based on the scientific method. It's trying to create robust evidence so that we can understand things more clearly. But if you really look into what spirituality is, and particularly in meditative kind of traditions, it's very much about doing exactly the same thing. It's about really deeply connecting with the truth of reality through a systemized process that's pretty rigorous. So I see the parallels, but I also see, when I was younger, I had a lot of meditative experiences from the age of kind of 7 through to, my early 30s is when I started to really tap into this properly. And in my late 30s, I had a series of experiences that kind of fundamentally changed me. And that meant that there was this kind of silence that was created within my experience, or found within my experience, and that became stabilized. And then once that happened, all the sort of stuff I would be doing with people at the university would have a different kind of quality to it. So I'd be kind of working with like students, and there would be, not only would I'd be giving a lecture, but afterwards they'd be saying to me like, hey, what's going on here? There's something else that you're doing that we can't quite put a handle on. And it would be the same with my patients and all these other people. And there would be these really dramatic results. So for me, I figured out how to use these things within the university while I was working there. I was there for 9 years teaching. And that's after, like a number of postgraduate degrees and undergraduate and all that sort of stuff. And I was working towards a PhD. But I saw the limitations in that I had to very much camouflage the work that I was doing. So I had to put it in a particular framework of language and make it palatable for the scientific method. And I think it's one of those things that, like, if you know something to be true within you and you're acting in a way that doesn't line up with that, it starts to wear you down.
Yep.
And I think you can only hold so many things in conflict internally for so long, and that's where it got to for me. I got to a point that at the university I felt I loved that. That was my dream job, and I'd worked my whole life to get there. But I knew there was something else that was more meaningful and more impactful for other people that I should be doing instead. And that's what it ended up leading towards a transition.
And that in itself is discussing around that, like, inner conflict that you're trying to do the right thing based upon what you've been told you have to essentially do, despite the fact that you don't necessarily believe it's the right thing overall, right? And I remember being at uni and having one of our lecturers at one point say, I'm going to teach you this. None of it's actually relevant anymore. They just haven't updated the system. And unfortunately, I have to teach you this, but it's wrong. And this is what you're going to get tested on. And you have to say this, but it's not correct.
Interesting.
And I was just like, that to me in itself really made me start to question that form of education. Not to say that it's invalid, not to say that there's nothing, beneficial from it. A lot of different pathways have to go through that. And I think a lot of them are great for going through that. But I did see towards the back end of my degree, it was all like, what could you recite from the textbook, not what was reality. And at that point, I'd been working with clients in a one-to-one setting for the better part of about 3 or 4 years. So I'd work with hundreds of people. And we were getting taught a textbook, which was great, gave us the really base foundation of understanding. But there was never that, like, more broad thought process, like about thinking for yourself, thinking outside the box. And I'd seen obviously anecdotally as well, which I'm sure you would have also, like, anecdotally things were a little bit different to what they were saying in the books, or different demographics and things like that. For you, with actually making that transition and deciding, hey, this isn't necessarily for me anymore, how did that actual process come about? Was it just like one day you woke up and you're like, I'm done? Or was it just like a steady flow on effect of a few different things happening? How did that actually eventuate?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a long story, but it was a series of events. When I was, I'd meditated for a long time, and I got to a point where I was reaching certain points within meditation that I was working with a teacher at the time who was a Zen monk. And he said to me that you need to have a particular lineage, because I was kind of a little bit freeform up until that point. He said, the point that you're at now with meditation, you need a lineage to try and hold you steady, because you're about to go into something completely different. And what that triggered off was I saw behind him, I could see an image of a mountain. I saw an old Indian man sitting in front of him. And then something went through the mountain, through the old Indian man, through my teacher, and it hit me in the chest. And then I couldn't speak for about an hour or so, 45 minutes, something like that. And I was just crying. I couldn't stop crying. And I'd had a number of visions my whole life up until that point, but this was something very particular. My teacher at the time was really excited, and I didn't know what was really happening, but I went home and I did some research, and I found this mountain. I figured out what the mountain was, and I figured out the old Indian man sitting in front of him. It was a guy called Sri Ramana Maharshi, who's a very famous Indian sage. I was at a point where I could decide between two options in that particular summer. One was to kind of go and work on a marriage that was in the middle of failing, which ended up failing, which was really great because that was what was needed. Or do I go to India and find this mountain and see what's going on? And I went to India. And this was, my third trip by that stage or something like that. But once I got to the mountain, there were just a series of unbelievable events that ended up with me in this thousands of year old temple with hundreds of people carrying me through this impromptu ceremony, which my experience of I can't really talk about and I can't fully describe, but it literally changed the way that my experience happens. And then it meant that from that point on, they at the temple, they had understood what had happened, and they were saying to me that I was, they said, we've got a car to come pick you up. You've got a house from here on in, everything in this town is going to be free for you, all this sort of stuff. And they were trying to set me up as a teacher there. And I was just like, nah, it's all good. It's all good. I'm just some guy sort of thing. I kind of passed them on and then I just walked off. But internally, there had been a very particular change and they had seen it. And so that was kind of the real catalyst, because at that point, I had to travel back to Australia to kind of dissolve the marriage that I was in and sort out, the house and all that sort of jazz. But I had seen at that point, well, then the rest of my life now is just going to be dedicated to this mountain. And I'm just going to go back. And I'd been working in some caves there for a while and stuff like that, doing meditation. And so I thought I was just going to go back and live somewhere around there and just kind of live an ascetic lifestyle and really fully do it. But in my process of going through and tidying up everything in Australia, then COVID happened. And then I couldn't travel anywhere. And then, for the next 3 or 4 years, that experience just kind of deepened, and it got to a point where it was just a natural process. I literally had nothing to do with it. I could just see the writing was on the wall, and life led me to the next step and the next step. And then eventually I had to step away from the university because the work that I was doing, it just overtook it. It just became too strong. And then I was trying to hide it because I was worried about my academic career. But as soon as I became more open about it, the people that I've worked with since then and the community that I have around me, I've got a few different groups around the country that I work with now. They recognize what it is and they're so supportive and it's so helpful,
Having that support, I'm sure, makes all the difference.
Yeah.
And I really I want to touch on this because this is something I've spoken about before. I've had other people mention it, but you kind of mentioned that you didn't necessarily openly tell the people around you within the university days.
Mm-hmm.
And did some of that, despite all the meditation and the spiritual practice that you'd probably done up until that point, did some of that still stem from a point of feeling judged about what others were thinking about you? Or did it where did that sort of sit within you?
I remember many years ago, I used to feel that. And that was something I had to kind of work through, because for me, it was always like I remember when I was really young, I'd have these crazy experiences where I would see people before they were going to die, and I knew when they were going to die. And then I would see them after they had died, and I'd be and they'd be trying to interact with me, and hundreds of different experiences throughout my whole life. And I remember going to school and talking to some kids at school, and I was like, hey, this is the sort of stuff that happened. And they laughed at me. And I was just like, oh, it got me so deeply. But from that point on, I kind of kept quiet about it, because that sort of thing isn't often accepted in normal society. So that was something I had to work with. But the thing that did it for me, it was like once I started getting better at being able to see my own mind and my own perceptions and my own experiences, it meant that I realized how flimsy and fallible my own perception is. And I was like, that's just based on all these other things. And it just seemed so biased. And so then once I recognized that within myself, I recognized that within everybody else as well. And then I was like, their perceptions of me don't matter. It naturally, again, fell away once I recognized the system of how people were perceiving things, But at that point, when I got to the point where I stepped away from university after this had all happened, it was more just like, what's the effective decision here? It was more just, I don't think this would be useful for my academic career. Nowadays, I mean, whatever people think of me, they're going to think about me, and good on them.
yeah, absolutely. I think that in itself is a powerful message, because it's exactly that. Like everything, and I had another guest on last week, and we actually discussed this, and it was more or less discussing about like how everything we see is essentially like an internal projection put outwards. And once you really start to understand that, and I know myself, the more I have started to find a bit more consistency within spirituality and all of these sort of practices, the more almost like self-assured, self-confident, and more self-belief I have in myself, which in turn obviously reduces that, like the fear of judgment, the fear of what if, or what was this person thinking kind of thing. Because for years, like ever since I was very young as well, I've spoken about it before, like my mum was very spiritual, very big on angel numbers and tarot cards and all of that sort of that side of things. And so we all grew up with it. So to me, it was quite normal to think about all this sort of different side of the world. And I always believed in a higher power, didn't necessarily believe in in a specific being, but I always believed there was something else out there. And I always believed there was something more out there. Even as a young kid, when I was going to church, I was like, I don't believe in a God, but I do believe there's something out there. And I don't know what it is, but I was a kid at the time, and kids are kids.
Was it like a feeling?
I just always had a feeling,
Mm.
always just had this weird feeling that like there's been more, and not to the same degree that you've mentioned where you've seen specific people and things like that. But myself, I've had different experiences where, the whole deja vu, and you kind of like, then you realizing that maybe you're not actually seeing an alternate reality. It's the reality that you're in, and it's just different perception as to how things have been. And I've always kind of just known. I've had a weird, deep feeling, deep knowing, delved around in the spirituality side of things. But again, being a young male within the fitness industry, also shied that part of myself away for fear of judgment, for fear of what others might think and what others might perceive. And then, as I said, the more I've dove into it over the last probably 12 months or so, really heavily, the more I'm starting to see that different lens. And instead of taking everything as a personal thing, you kind of look at it and go, okay, well, what is that person going through that they're feeling that way, that they're thinking that way? Or so like, it's always along those sort of lines that the way in which we perceive things is not how we perceive them. And the way in which other people perceive them is not. It's all through their own lens, their own experiences, their own learned identities.
And that's liberating, right?
It is. It honestly feels like a weird, and Trav and me actually spoke about this. You kind of almost like, you don't feel sorry, but it's an empathy. You feel empathy for others, because like for someone to have a perception negatively for something you're doing that has no effect on them, you kind of like, what's happened to you that you feel the way that you need to feel that way? And I know myself going through school and stuff, like I can put my hand up. I wasn't the greatest kid in the world. I was a bit of a shit. I was fucking battling an internal identity crisis that just went on for years and years and years until I finally took myself away from my hometown. And once you actually sort of start to sit with that a little bit more, it almost just makes like, you just as you said, a little bit more free, like it's a little bit more liberating. It's just that like, oh, okay, cool. That person doesn't necessarily agree with what I'm doing. Sweet. Like that's fine. I'm still going to do me. I'm still going to do the things that I do. And as long as I know that I'm doing things out of the greater good for myself, but everyone else, in terms of, it's not harmful to others. It's not hurting people. It's not doing any negative things. Like I'm not taking advantage of anyone or anything like that. Like I think that in itself is, I really don't see a problem with it.
Of course. Yeah.
I think it's something that at the end of the day, more people should probably aspire to be. Have a little bit of a different lens through that.
Yeah, I think that like when you have this moment where you realize that your perception actually shapes your experience, that's a real key piece of information. And it can seem so subtle and so nothing, but it's actually the whole game. And then you have an opportunity there to start to be brave enough to consider your own experience and your own perceptions and be compassionate to yourself in them, because it really is such a untapped thing that if we think that our experience is completely dictated by what's happening externally to us, inevitably it's going to cause pain. There will always be pain and suffering associated with it. But once we recognize that it's actually an internal game, it's not to say there won't be pain and suffering, but the context in which it occurs is going to be completely different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
And it's probably going to take me a fucking very, very long time to fully embody that. Like,
lifetimes.
It's always going to be one of those things, right? So you said you've been at this for about 25 years.
Yeah, a little longer,
roughly,
but yeah.
How old are you?
I'm 41.
Okay, cool. So I'm 29. So for me, I'm still like, I reckon I'm just at the base of the hill.
Sure.
Just looking, knocking on the door to see what's sort of around and having a bit of a...
what feels true to you? What is the piece of this that it's kind of like dragging you towards it? Because it's interesting. You said that part of your life you've gone in one direction, and then you could always feel there was a little bit of a pull pulling you back towards this thing. And as you start to move back toward it, it starts to become a little stronger.
It's funny. I don't actually know if I spoke with Trav about this on the podcast, but I did when we jumped on a call after it. And for me, I've always had like a strong intuition, like a very strong intuition, to the point where I grew up in Townsville. I'm from Melbourne originally, but I grew up in Townsville. And I was about 14, and I remember saying to myself, I'm going to move to the Gold Coast. No idea why. I'd been to the Gold Coast maybe twice for holidays. Thought it was great, the previews on TV looked great, the theme parks and all the fun stuff. But I said at 14, and I have a Facebook status from when I was 14 being like, can't wait to one day live on the Gold Coast in an apartment by the beach. And then just throughout that, like that was 14, kept going through the next couple of years and didn't really know the direction I was going after school and things like that. And one thing led to another. And one day, one of my best mates at the time brought me just this random university course. He's like, oh, there's this sick, I was obsessed with surfing. Hadn't really surfed much in my life at all. But the Gold Coast obviously has surf. I was obsessed with surfing. And he was like, oh, dude, there's like this really cool course on the Gold Coast, sports management surf studies. And at that point, I wasn't even going to university because I dropped out of the classes that I needed to be able to actually go. And I was like, oh, fuck. I was like, you know what? I'll just apply, see what happens. Probably not going to get in, but that's fine. And by just some gravitational pull, I don't know what you want to call it, I got in. And then all of these series of events just happened where like I left Townsville. I had basically no money, no house, no job. I had a car, but I didn't have a license. Didn't have like any real way of setting myself up down here or anything. And I just called my dad and was like, hey, I have to be on the Gold Coast on this date. I don't really know anything. It's like if we can stay there for a week and try and sort shit out. And then one by one, just things, I got a house the day I arrived. I rocked up, found out it was actually the university orientation day. And I arrived. The first person I met there had the exact same name as my brother. And my brother has a very unique name. And I'd never heard another person with a name in my life. And I was like, that's weird, but okay. Left the orientation, had a missed call, called it back. It was a guy that had been contacted from my boss for my job in Townsville, who basically said, hey, mate, like I've spoken to your boss. He has said, I've given a really good feedback. If you want to come and have a chat with me, there's a potential that I've got a job here for you. I was like, oh, wow, okay. Went over, had the interview. He's like, yeah, you got the job. You start in 2 weeks. I was like, fuck, that's sick. Within about 20 minutes, I was looking around on places to stay and things like that and found a lady who'd had a house advertised. She was looking for females only just because she was a young mum. And I messaged her. I was like, hey, look, I understand you're looking for females only, but here's a bit about me. Like I've got young sisters, like I've grown up with all of that. And we went and caught up and she was like, I'd love for you to move in. And she basically became like a surrogate mother for me for the first like year of living on the Gold Coast. So my first time out of home, I just had all these things just pull me in directions.
And that feels different, hey? Like there's a feel to that is different than
it's a knowing. It's not I explain it as a knowing. And similarly, like I had a series of events occur last year that genuinely, like I've explained it before, just flipped my whole world on its head. Every single thing from about a year ago to now is totally different in my life. And it was as if everything had to fall apart for everything to fall together. And as I was putting the pieces back together, and every single time I've ever had to put the pieces back together in my life after they've crumbled, I've come back to the spirituality side of things. I've come back to the spiritual practices. I've come back to the universe, knowing that it's protecting, looking at things like meditation, journaling, grounding, like all these different breathwork techniques and things like that. I've always come back to that. But then as soon as things start to feel good, I've always just gone, okay, cool, I'm sweet now. I'm off, I go. And then I kind of get out of the habit. And then it's like one thing leads to another and I'm back here again. So this time I was like, well, if I keep coming back to this thing, this energy, this whatever it is, when I'm sad or when I'm feeling down or when things are bad, like why don't I stick with that? Because it gets me feeling good. It's like, why don't I start to feel great? And the more I've like leaned into that and started to trust my gut more and follow my intuition, the more these things just like doors start to open, things start to happen, and you're just like, okay.
Interesting, isn't it?
It's going to be okay. It's like you sit there and the worst things that have ever happened to you seem to lead to the best outcomes. And the more evidence I've seen of that, like I'm someone who's very logical. I'm someone who's very like probably previously very narrow-minded and just this is the way kind of thing, very systemized. And the more I've sort of seen evidence of like good, bad, indifferent, everything ends up where it needs to be. And that as well is like a very liberating or freeing feeling because you kind of just like, cool, like this is just another wave. And instead of the downtimes dragging on, you sort of bring yourself out of them a little bit better. You're able to find yourself and come back to your body or come back to yourself a little bit easier. And then you can then it's just that evidence, right? At the end of the day, more evidence you can gather, the better things are going to be long term. So
yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
It's just I don't know how to explain it to people who don't understand it though. That's the biggest thing. It's like, it's hard to say like, hey, everything's going to be okay. Like, I know that this is horrible right now, but trust me, like I promise you, you might look back in 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, but it's all going to have mattered for your greater good.
It's interesting because it's like you're talking about something that's hard to put a label on. It's hard to like pin it down, and it gives you a sense that everything's going to be okay. But you can't rationally figure that one out. You don't know why it's all going to be okay, but you can just have a feeling that it's going to be okay.
Yeah, it can be hard. Like it's still, again, don't get me wrong, it's something I still struggle with. Like, there's certain situations where I'm like, I know that this is going to be all okay, but it doesn't stop it from hurting right now. It doesn't stop that sting. It doesn't stop our perception of what's going on. It doesn't stop maybe our ingrained feedback loops, our mind, the way it's been trained for the better part of the entire time we've been alive, that's shaped our way of life and shaped the way we are. Logically, we can be like, it's going to be okay. Consciously, we can sit there and go, it's going to be okay. Subconsciously, sometimes it's a little bit of a different narrative that comes about. With that, with more of the subconscious side of things, and obviously a lot of your work revolves around meditation. I know a lot of people really struggle to meditate at the start because, and this is feedback I've gotten from clients and things like that, is like they can't stop their mind. I used to struggle with meditation because I physically was just laying there and I was like, I can't stop my mind. I've used guided meditations, which I find help me a little bit more to just allow myself into that like space a little bit easier. But someone like yourself, where like throughout the journey, you've seen probably everything you can possibly see with that, with a lot of things. How has that sort of come about from where you started with meditation and how it sort of transitioned, and what it means for you and how that actually looked for people?
Yeah, there's obviously a few points in there, right? So it started for me out of necessity because when I was younger, I would have these experiences that, they started when I was 7 years old. So as a young kid, they were pretty scary. And so what it meant was that my mum said to me that, you need to start meditating to try and manage these experiences. And so from the age of kind of 7 through to 16, I meditated every day really thoroughly for, I don't know, somewhere in the region of half an hour to an hour. And it meant that I got to a point where I was able to shut those things off. So that was how I got started with it. And it wasn't until my kind of late 20s where I really opened it up again, and then it really took off. So that was my personal journey with it. But I think the thing you're kind of touching on with meditation is that it can feel really hard at first. And often it's because people have an expectation that they're going to be able to shut their mind off, and that they feel like that is the goal. So at certain points, the mind will quieten down, and at very high points, it will stop. Like the chatter will stop. But there's still elements of your mind there. And then, at certain layers of samadhi, they will disappear as well. So what it means is that if you go into it with the expectation of stopping your mind, if I say to you, stop your mind right now, what's going to happen to your mind? It's going to go berserk. So you have to let go of that piece of expectation, first of all. And the second bit is that it's about concentration training. That's the starting point. So Dhyana is concentration training, and that comes first. Sorry, Dharana. And so that's about making sure that you can hold your attention. Right now, we can have a conversation and you can hold your attention on me pretty easily, right? If I was boring, it would be harder to hold your attention on me. So that's very similar to meditation, the starting point. You might want to hold your attention on just listening to one song quietly. And it's a real chilled song, but you're going to pay attention to all the instruments in that music. And you're going to really listen to it. And that might be your starting point. And then after that, you might make it a little more challenging, and you might just listen to a really simple track of, say, a violin playing or a guitar or something really simple. And then you might just say, I'm going to go to something more simple, which is I'm just going to feel my breathing coming in and out of my nose and just kind of count the breaths. Make it a little more challenging. I'm just going to feel the breathing. Make it a little more challenging, a little more challenging. So it's kind of like weight training for your attention. That's kind of the starting point. You're not going to jump in straight away and tell someone to go do a 150 kg bench press, right? They're going to break something.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with your mind. There's research that shows that meditation is actually really detrimental to people who have severe anxiety. It causes them real problems. So if you have severe anxiety, you should not meditate.
Dang.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because what happens if I get someone who has severe anxiety to close their eyes and tell them really rigidly that you're not allowed to think? What's going to happen to their mind then? They already struggle in the normal world, right?
Yeah.
So this is why concentration has to be the entry point. And the concentration they call it a meditation object, the object of your concentration has to be at a level that's manageable for you. That's easy to do to begin with, and you can hold your attention on it. And then as your concentration becomes stronger, you make the meditation object more subtle, and then more subtle, and then more subtle. Eventually, you end up with no meditation object. And then you start to watch the layers of reality change in front of you. But that's not for everybody. That takes a long time, and that's a lot of dedicated work to get to that point. So it's about making it successful to begin with. That's the entry point.
So with that then, would you say that meditation is perceived in the world versus true meditation are two different things?
Yeah, I think people have a lot of misconceptions about what it is.
Yeah,
You know,
I would put my hand up and say, after your explanation, then I've thought about meditation the completely wrong way.
Oh yeah, it happens, right? Yeah, and you know what's even more interesting, because I can go into a lot more detail about this. I mean, in all of these topics, meditation isn't something that you work at. It's a state of concentration that is achieved without effort. Concentration is the entry point that you begin with. Concentration naturally leads to a meditation, which is a state of unbroken concentration. And then meditation naturally leads to a state of samadhi, which is a meditative absorption. And then there are different layers within that. Yeah.
That's
But
so
this is where, for me,
different to my perception of what it actually was.
yeah. And this is not information that I have sat down and read. It's information that I've seen experientially, because you can see it. When you get to a certain point within meditation, you will see these things and you understand the mechanisms and how they work. So that's why it's, having a guide is very useful. And it's not to say that everyone has to have someone really rigidly working with them constantly, but you need to have a little bit of advice from someone that you can trust. You know what I mean? Because otherwise, I have worked with one guy who was a Buddhist monk. He had been a monk for, I don't know, maybe 20 years or something. And he had a severe anxiety issue and it hadn't gotten any better.
Okay.
And I met him in Sri Lanka in this jungle monastery. He was an American guy, and I talked to him about the meditation that I was working on at that point, and he said he'd read about that in books, but he'd never achieved anything like that. And I was just some dude from the suburbs of Christchurch in New Zealand. You know what I mean? But I was lucky enough that I had applied the method in the correct way. And also, I hadn't started with a severe anxiety issue to begin with. So my starting point was different than his.
That's crazy to me to think of a monk who has anxiety.
Yeah, man.
From what I've read with Buddhism and around monks and things like that, like it's almost as if they're this free-flowing, just not a worry in the world type being that just never lets anything affect them.
Well, some of them have reached those states. Others have not. Some of them never will. I have met monks that I haven't met any Buddhist monks who are fully enlightened, but I've met one or two that were very close, very, very, very close to full enlightenment. I have met a locksmith who was at the same point as them. Random locksmith in India who was working in the shop. I have met fully enlightened saints who are past that point, and everybody in between. And then I've met anxious monks, and I have met deeply connected and spiritual CEOs of a Singaporean company, an American. It was a multinational company, and he was deeply connected to spirituality and had no awareness that he was. And he was talking to me about how you use emotions to create change within the world as energy rather than being trapped by them.
Like that.
And this was a guy that I met in the airport who, I was heading to India, he was going back to Singapore.
Yeah.
And he had no concept of spirituality. So this is where with spirituality, people have a preconceived conception of what it looks like. They look at me and I just look like some guy. If you see me in India, I'm wearing basically robes and all these different things, and I'm walking barefoot through the streets, and they're doing all sorts of things to me if they know me, because it's not about the outward projection. It's an internal experience. That's what the whole game is. That's what you were talking about at the start.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It was something that I know at the very start when I first launched this podcast, and in the very first episode, I was talking about, so that the whole, I know you've listened to an episode or two, but
Yeah,
basically it was more encapsulating everything: physical, emotional, mental, spiritual. And when I actually mentioned about, spirituality and things like that, the amount of people who messaged me at the start, they're like, I didn't take you to be spiritual. I didn't think you'd be very spiritual. I didn't think this. I didn't think that. Because at that point, when I first started this, it was actually probably around the same weight, but like a lot of people have known me as, the 110 to 120 kilo power lifter with a massive beard and a bald head covered in tattoos. And like, that's their perception of what I am. And because they've perceived me as that, and that is an outward projection that I've obviously put out there. I know how I've just, I'm by design. I know exactly how I am.
Sure.
I know how I'm perceived by others. It always takes people back when they learn a little bit more about that about me. And I guess, again, it's their preconceived idea of like, he looks like this, so he must be like this.
Totally. And their perception of what spirituality is.
Exactly. And the more I've dived into it, the more I have realized that like spirituality isn't the crazy woo-woo high priestess thing that just exists randomly on an Instagram or a TikTok video or whatever. That's like, that is spirituality to them.
Sure.
And the way in which they've perceived spirituality and whatever the case might be.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be.
No.
Like you've just explained a couple of different examples there of like,
yeah,
how it can be so different dependent upon the person.
Because you know what it comes down to, right? Like if you look at a very secular, straightforward way of looking at spirituality, it's literally about the quality of your moment-to-moment experience. So it's not about what you're doing externally, how many things you're getting, and blah, blah, blah. That's nothing to do with this. This is about the quality of the experience that you're having.
More or less being in the present moment.
Well, it depends. It depends on how you want to phrase it, right? Some people might be saying, well, that means I want to lead a deeply fulfilling life. I think most people in society would agree with that. Some people might say it's about being in the present moment. Other people might say it might be about living God's path or being in contact with God. Other people might say it might be about getting closer to the reality of this experience. Within Advaita Vedanta, they may talk about living within the non-dual awareness that is the truth of Brahman.
So everyone's identification with it is different.
Of course.
And
everyone's looking for different pieces of it. But we're all kind of going towards the same thing. We all want to feel this feeling that it's all going to be okay, that we're connected to our life and our experience, that we're in it, and that it's deeply fulfilling for us, And
everyone is fulfilled by different things.
Sure. But you know what it is? It's not about the things that fulfill you. It's the experience of you being fulfilled. That's the thing you're actually looking for. You know what I'm pointing at there?
I do. Yes, I get what you're saying, because, and I've seen other people talk about this, spiritual teachers and things like that, where some have said, there's this like preconceived notion that if you're spiritual, you can't want money, you can't want things, you can't want this, you can't want that, because that's not what spirituality is. But if it is more or less looking for that internal fulfillment, if that's what somebody's chasing, that could be the thing for somebody else within reason.
Well, anything that's external that you're looking to make you feel a certain way is going to not work. And you'll realize that at a certain point.
Yeah.
And it depends, because, money will make you have a nicer lifestyle and it will make you temporarily happier. Anyone who has achieved anything in their life that they've been chasing, once they've got it, it's nice. And then it starts to lose its luster a little bit. It always happens. It's just natural.
We've all been there.
They call it the hedonic treadmill. It's part of our biology is to chase the next thing.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, you've got a choice between continuing to chase things consistently and then getting the next thing and getting the next thing and getting the next thing, or realizing that mechanism and realizing the trap that's inherent within it, recognizing that that isn't going to be the thing that's going to fulfill me long term. And there's this whole other group of people talking about an internal fulfillment that comes for no reason, deep peace for no reason. Walk into work, for some reason you feel extremely deeply peaceful and contented, and it's just another Friday, just another Monday. It doesn't particularly matter. So that's because it's not based on an external experience. It's based on your internal perception of your external experience. which is again what we started talking about. So then what that means is there's different methods of turning yourself inward to explore those different elements of your perception, and then systematically working with them until you get closer to the reality as it is.
How far along that journey do you think you are? Or like, where would you put yourself within
Yeah,
that
well,
realm?
I mean, from what I've read, because I work with my teacher and he explained to me where I was and from his perception, which was good, because you've got to be humble about these things. Like, no one's an absolute. This is definitively how things are. I have gone through everything that you will read about in all the different texts, except for the final piece of the puzzle. I have experienced it, but it hasn't solidified. So where I am is, I can talk about a lot of these things through experience, which is nice. And I can talk about them. I remember reading Patanjali's Yoga Sutras when I was studying yoga, and then realizing, I don't know how many years ago it was now, I read that book and I was like, oh, I've got to the end of this book. And that wasn't through reading it, it was the end of the experience of this book. And that is the start of Advaita Vedanta. So, yeah, I'm giving you a very complicated answer here. It's very technical, but it's a very complicated answer.
Yes.
What I would say to you, right, is what's your perception of where we are to reach? Where's like, have you heard of enlightenment before?
I've heard of enlightenment, yeah.
Great. Where are those people in your perception? What do you think?
In relation to where I am right now, or
Sure.
just in general?
In general.
Realistically speaking, probably like this far away enigma that exists, but I would have zero idea about how to get there.
Yep.
Because for me, I guess again, it comes from all the learned experiences and things like that. But even diving into this stuff, still seeing how many levels there are to it, and just thinking, fuck, that's a long way. That's a very long way.
Great. This is good. I mean, this is not necessarily going to relate to everyone who's listening, but this is going to be useful for you. So your experience right now is the end goal. So the end goal is the experience that's occurring right now. But it's just being able to see the experience that's occurring right now clearly. So right now we can do an experiment, right? Internally, I want you to drop all resistance to anything that's happening. So what that might mean is you're like, oh, I want this to be different or this or that or whatever, right? So very quickly you can kind of go, I'm going to let this experience be whatever it is, whether it's good or bad, frustrating, happy, whatever. Cool. That's pretty easy to do. Great. The next thing you can start to do is recognize that your mind is going to give you a lot of information. For a moment, don't worry about it. Just for a moment, don't follow what it's giving you because it's going to give you a whole bunch of junk right now anyway. Useful in certain situations, not right now. Then for a moment, same thing with what you can see, taste, touch, feel, hear. Drop any reaction to that. Just let it be exactly how it is. What happens? How do you feel?
You're incredibly calm, like calm, peaceful.
Great. Incredibly calm is the starting point. And you can take this further and further and further and further. Because what we're doing there is we're actively looking to drop our perceptions of our current moment. And as we drop our perceptions of the current moment, we get closer to the current moment as it is. Instead of trying to figure it out, we just be with the moment that we're in. And this is the entry point. This deep calm is the entry point. And then what you can also feel is there may be things that come up in resistance to that. Very quickly, you'll notice, there's still something that's resisting the current moment. That you can explore. You can examine that and you can free yourself of those things. Because those are these habitual patterns that are resisting the moment as it is.
So it doesn't necessarily need to be a thought. It can be a feeling or a tension somewhere in the body or,
Totally.
or a sound or just something that's...
Yeah. Anything in your experience.
Yeah.
Because it's your whole experience. And we're looking at the quality of your experience because we talked about how spirituality was like an examination of the quality of your experience. So if we were already have the knowledge that this moment is whole and full and perfect the way it is, just as an experiment, let's say, then that means we can drop any resistance to it. As we drop that resistance to it, we'll naturally find a state of calm peacefulness arises. And then that calm peacefulness will take us further into this experience. Because out of that calm peacefulness, you can see things more clearly.
I've definitely experienced moments of this feeling, of that feeling, like that I guess some people can explain it as presence, being present within that moment. I'm sure you're probably familiar with Eckhart Tolle's work about presence and everything like that. And that's something for me that definitely helped to open my eyes about what that feeling is. Because I'm sure everyone's experienced it, whether you just
Definitely.
have that deep, calm sit and there's just nothing. There's nothing running through your head. There's nothing running through your mind. And I guess for me, I've always perceived meditation has to be that. Presence has to be that constantly. And I guess if that is the end goal, but it's always been hard to sort of maintain that state because then the resistance comes or the whatever might happen, and then
Totally.
allowing yourself to actually sit with and understand.
Yeah, and as soon as you
What's
let go
going
of
on.
chasing that state, there it will be. As soon as you let go of resisting the moment that it is. Because if you're in a moment where you don't experience that state and you're in resistance to experiencing whatever you're experiencing, that's just going to tie you even a tighter knot. So it's about this acceptance of what's happening right now, whatever the circumstances. And it doesn't mean that you're not going to shape your life in a particular way or work towards goals or anything. But it's just that if right now we're sitting here on the Gold Coast and we were wishing that we were in Paris, that would be suffering for no reason, because there's no way we could be in Paris because we're right here, right now. Maybe next week we might be, but right now, impossible. So that conflict between reality and our perception is causing pain. Yeah.
I like that a lot.
Yeah. But this is where it's a practice of continually refining your perception and working it down. And it's not about turning yourself into, I need to be doing this way or that way or whatever. It's just about being with yourself, being with your experience. And it takes bravery and resilience and a lot of self-compassion to actually authentically look at who you are, even just for yourself. It's a real, we have a lot of difficulty in even just considering what our true perspective is or our true sense of self is. It's scary at the start, really scary.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Again, I'm only just on scratching the surface of it all, but I know at the start for me, when I first dove a little bit more into this, and I guess it comes from an emotional maturity thing. In my earlier 20s, we were not fucking emotionally regulated enough to be able to do some of that stuff. Like I've been diagnosed with ADHD and things like that. So early 20s and late teens were just wild times for my brain. And as you know, you're maturing and learning and growing and trying to do life and things. I knew that for me to find better for what I wanted in life, it was going to be sitting with some very uncomfortable things and confronting some things about myself that I didn't like, I didn't want to like, and instead of hiding them and shaming them and just building that sort of circular emotion around just repeating the same shit over and over, it was like trying to bring it a little bit more to the surface, diving a little bit more into some of the shadow work things, and it is hard. It's fucking hard. It's really hard.
Yeah.
Confronting yourself is tougher than confronting anything else you'll ever do, I believe, from the things I've learned so far. As you said, it's brave, it takes compassion, because you need to have compassion and grace and understanding for yourself that what comes up and things like that. I know you mentioned that for majority of people who may be listening to this, who may not even be at that particular point in time right now, do you believe meditation is the best, that's the starting point to find that? Is there other practices that you feel help at first for people to practice feeling that presence, that calm, that...
Yeah, I think a lot of people can find it in a lot of different ways, depending on your propensities. Some people like surfing is a really great example of finding presence, or playing sport, or playing music, or cooking, or talking with good friends, or whatever. So there's all these different points that will bring you towards that. But if you would like more of those experiences, when you're talking to a friend and it just time goes past like that, and it's just the best time, and it just feels like you're in a little bubble. That's the thing we're kind of pointing at, right? That's that kind of presence feeling. So you can train your experience, will train yourself to experience more of that more regularly. And that's what meditation does. And so it's useful for everybody, of course. We train our bodies, we train our pets, we train all these other things, but we don't train our own mind, our own perception, So it's super useful for everybody. But it just has to be started at a pace that's the right pace for them. And it has to be tailored to them. If someone goes off and does the same practice as a Theravadan monk who's been practicing for 40 years, it's like you're going to cause yourself a mental injury. It's not going to work. So you have to do it at a pace that's right for you. But yeah, like the thing that's interesting with meditation is it's right for the people who start doing it because it's almost self-selecting. Like if we're having this conversation right now, whoever's listening to this conversation is already interested in spirituality. Otherwise, they've turned it off. People who come and work with me are already interested in meditation. Otherwise, they haven't sought me out. So if you're interested, then it's for you.
Yeah.
And then you just have to start it at a place that feels good. And then you progressively, through skillful means, make it more effective.
And I love that because I know before you referenced meditation similar to the gym. And I always say to people when they're starting out their journey, no matter where they are, you find the entry point that is where you're at, and over time you build, you add, you increase, load, weights, reps, sets, exercises, difficulty of exercises, all these sort of different things. And what you've just said there, it's no different. It is the exact same thing. It's finding your entry point. And you mentioned about, I'm not going to get somebody who's fresh to the gym to try and bench 150 kilos for the first time. But for the person who can bench 150 kilos already, it's absolutely their starting point.
Totally.
And that starting point is different to somebody else's, but it doesn't necessarily change. I love that. I fucking love that.
Yeah. It makes sense, right?
That's honestly like the best description I've ever heard for meditation.
Yeah.
Because at the start, I genuinely understood people's resistance to it.
Totally.
Because it's hard.
It's really hard.
It sounds hard.
Yeah, it is.
And there's been times where I know for a fact I've gotten into a very meditative state. And then other times where
how did that state feel?
Fucking amazing.
Did it feel easy?
Easy.
Very easy.
But then I've done the exact same thing and it hasn't. And I'm like, but this worked. And now it does. And it's like just trying to...
This is the nature of the mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's chaos in there.
It is.
It's real chaos. Yeah. And eventually through meditation, you'll recognize a deeper element of our experience that is able to witness the mind and use the mind as a tool rather than the mind be the driver. So right now, most people, you hear a thought go off and it's typically like I'm saying something. You'll hear it say something horrific to you. And then you'll completely buy into that because it'll feel like that thought is you saying it to yourself. Within meditation, very quickly, people will notice that they can witness their thought when it happens. Then the question is, well, if you're witnessing your thought, that means you can't be your thought. You have to be the witnesser of your thought. And that little bit of distance between where you are and where the thought is takes away the power of the thought. And so the thought no longer is me thinking something, it's a thought occurring. And because of that, it has less power and I can decide what I do with that information rather than being at the whims of that particular thought.
And with that, meditation's the best way to start to almost disassociate from the two, so you can step back from that thought and witness it rather than experience it as yours.
Well, it's witnessing the whole picture because you never push it away being like it's not real because it is there, but it's about witnessing a deeper aspect of experience. Yeah, and meditation is one of the ways of training yourself to do this. There's a lot of other contemplative methods, in different traditions, but this is the tradition that seems to have taken a hold within the Western culture these days, So meditation is really useful for that. But people will find, like if you have a passion, if you do something that is your passion, you do the passion because it makes you feel good, it makes you feel really good. And it's effortless when you're really passionate about it. Then the thing is, well, what are you actually chasing? You're not chasing the external experience. You're not chasing that thing. You're chasing the way that it makes you feel. So again, it comes back to that internal way. You're internally looking for something. And so you'll keep on chasing a passion to get the internal experience until you realize it's about the internal experience. And then you'll have to find a method of working with your internal experience. For some people, it's psychology. That will take you so far. But to really do things deeply, it's something like meditation. Yeah.
I love that. That's fucking blowing my mind.
Yeah.
Opened my mind to a new view.
Yeah.
But
the stuff is very real.
It's almost made it less daunting because The way you've explained that, at least for me anyway, people who are listening, they're obviously, again, the perception's going to be slightly different.
Sure.
But it's made it less daunting.
Mm.
It's
That's
not
good.
something that's so hard now. It's something that's like, oh, I feel that feeling all the time. When I went back to play footy, I grew up playing footy. I went back to play it this year, and it was like, I remember standing out on the oval like a couple of times and just standing there and just being like, fuck, this is just at peace, calm.
Bingo. So that feeling.
That's why I go to the beach all the fucking time.
Yeah, it's all the stuff.
I've always known I go to the beach when I'm stressed, worried, or whatever. But I start my day every single morning. I go to the beach first thing in the morning to walk my dog.
So are you chasing the beach, or are you chasing the experience it gives you?
I've always had a weird inclination that I'm chasing the experience, because to me, it's not the beach. I can do it by a lake, a body of water.
It's something that happens to you.
Yeah.
Totally.
It doesn't necessarily have to be the beach, but the beach for me is just somewhere that I found that I'm able to find that more frequently.
So then the question is, do you want this to be more frequent in your life?
Of course.
Of course.
Why would you not want to feel this way?
Great. So then now you've got the motivation. Before you talked about it was all about trying to get away from hard moments in your life. Now you've got the motivation towards what it could give you in your life. This is the carrot that's dangling in front of you. That thing that you're talking about can become your normal everyday experience, irregardless of what's happening externally. These are the big goals. These are the big goals. But, like you literally can head in that direction. And it's just about recognizing how important it is to you and then working toward it. Because there's the feeling that it gives you. And right now you can experience that feeling, right? You can experience it. So if you experience it and you can feel it, start to pay attention to what it is. And then start to pay attention for where is it taking me? What's it leading me toward? When I hang out with this person, I feel it. When I hang out with that person, I don't feel it. That's interesting. When I do this activity, I feel it. When I do this job, I'm not into it. Yeah. And you can see why I turned away from a university career to do this, right? You can feel how passionate I am about this and how deeply true it is for me.
100%.
Like this wasn't like a small thing that happened to me. This was like my whole experience changed fundamentally, and it wasn't anything that I could turn away from. It was out of my control.
You just had to lean in.
Nothing I could do.
It's genuinely like, it's changed a lot of my perception of a lot of that. A lot of these things.
Yeah, like I'm literally just some guy walking down the road, and I work with people online. And the people who know me, they know this stuff. But like, I don't look any different than anybody else. It's just I'm still living my life and paying my taxes.
I loved that when I was looking at your profile originally.
Yeah.
I was like, to me, you just, from a perception perspective, I was like, you're just a normal dude. Just a normal dude who, like, you would just see walk down the street, and you're just like, this normal guy strolling past.
Yeah. It's true. Yeah, because like, I don't particularly care about my external projection that much. I do a little bit. Like I'm still like I shave and like I'm making sure I look presentable and stuff. I take care of myself. And like I like this t-shirt, So I'm still kind of whatever, but I'm not at the point where I'm like I need to project a certain image so that people think a particular thing about me, because that's exhausting. I'm like I don't have time for that. I don't. It's like it's just not useful. And that's the same thing about spirituality. There's a thing called spiritual materialism. So it's the idea that you can take this badge of being a spiritual person and inflate your identity around it. And this is what sometimes happens on Instagram and things like that, where someone's a very, very spiritual person outwardly, and they look a particular way and they say particular things and all this sort of stuff. And it's just wasted effort. Because you can just kind of sit down into your experience as it is and be there, and all of your need to do all those sorts of things will just disappear. It's just like smoke. You see straight through it. It's not particularly useful. Yeah. But again, that's from my perception.
Of course.
For someone else, they need to do this thing and that's great. But the key is what you feel, what you experience, and you keep on coming back to that. When I was younger, I remember never even considering what I felt to be important. I was like, you achieve the goals, you do the things, you get the job, you win the rugby game, you do all the stuff. It was never about, well, how did I feel when I was doing those things? And particularly as guys, that's something that's overlooked. We're just trained to just be these juggernauts that emotionalists, don't stop, you're the man, do the thing, But that's cutting yourself off from the richness of your life as it is. Like the depths of walking down the road and seeing the clouds in the sky and really, really seeing them and for the beauty that there's actually there. It's like it sounds really fluffy and stuff, but it's really there as soon as you start to consider your own experience, Yeah.
I love that. Honestly, as I said, it's changed. It hasn't changed my mind. It's opened my mind. I think it's offered me a different perspective, but not even more of a definitive perspective, but it's just allowed a little bit more understanding.
Yeah,
a deeper understanding of what this is, of what meditation is. Again, like that to me is, I guess, different to what I've ever thought it would be. That's why I love having these conversations.
Yeah.
That's why I like the way in which everything's sort of like just flowing.
What a fun job, hey?
I know. That's honestly, like, this is, we said this at the start before we even started recording, but like, if I just continued to put it off, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. I wouldn't have met someone like Trav. I wouldn't have met some of the people I've met. I wouldn't have the conversations I've been having. I wouldn't have a lot of these just like little pieces just flowing through. Little pieces just coming together as they slowly piece together as they keep transitioning through this journey.
And then you kind of live your life in a way that feels good to you, and you can feel there's a bit of a pull in a certain direction, because that pull, that feeling, it's actually looking for you. Like I use this phrase quite a lot. It's literally looking for you, and it's waiting for you to find it. And as soon as you find it, it's going to get a hold of you, and it's going to become more and more obvious in your life. And you can use it as a compass. You can really just, like we were saying before, if you feel it in regards to certain things, you're like, I need to go in that direction. If you want more of that in your life, if you want it in your life.
Absolutely. The intuition.
Yeah.
I like to use the intuition, which I know myself. It's been fucking scary to follow my intuition sometimes. Sometimes it's a scary thing to be like, it's like, it tells you something in your gut and you're like, hang on, we're going to resist that a little bit because that could lead to something that I don't know if I'm ready for, if I'm comfortable enough with, or whatever the case might be. But then when I have listened to it and I'm just gone with it, I'm like, oh, actually, hang on a second. And then you ride that wave of that energy, that seek that energy. You want to find more things to make you feel good by following that, chasing that.
If you pay attention to your life, there's a journey that's unfolding that's leading you towards something if you choose to go in that direction.
It's all a choice.
And some people will never choose that direction. Their whole life, they won't choose it. And it doesn't mean you have to quit your job and stop paying your taxes and walk out on your family or anything like that, because it's an internal journey. Like have you heard of The Hero's Journey by like Joseph Campbell?
I finished reading The Alchemist last night, which was
cool. That's an example of the hero's journey.
The legend, personal legend, he calls it.
That's the same concept, right?
Yeah.
And the truth of all of those heroes' journeys is it's all about an internal journey.
Yep.
And the dragons are your own personal dragons, And this is where it's the choice between how would you like to live your life. And everyone's got full choice and autonomy, but if you can feel there's an inkling towards this thing, that's the direction you should go in. And you just give people a nudge and say, hey, you should check out what's happening inside of yourself right now. Keep on looking, because you will have to come up against some dragons, but there's reward in there beyond what you would ever believe, beyond what they talk about in books. It's startling. I remember when I got back from India after the kind of fourth trip where I had this big change occur. I came back and there's a friend of mine who owns a yoga studio here on the coast, or a couple now. And I said to her, we're going to have coffee. I was like, I don't drink coffee, but I was like, come have some, sit down with me. I was like, dude, I just have to tell you some stuff, because everything we've been working on for all these years, it's true. It's true and it's real and it's actually there. And it was just like, I just wanted, this is what compelled me. I was like, people need to understand that this isn't a fairy tale. This is a true thing that they can do. Everyone can do it. It's like, it's really there. And if there's that much internal riches to be had, geez, you've got to give the other people a nudge too and go, check it out. go get some. Yeah.
Rising tide lifts all ships.
Yeah, I think so.
Bring
Hey.
everyone up to that high flying bubble.
Yeah, which is right here.
Yeah.
It's just deeply in this experience.
I think I love that, and I honestly think that's a perfect way to wrap it up. To be honest, I think that covers so much, and there's been so much insightful information for people who are listening. For those who are at home, do you want to give a plug for where to find you, how to work? Like if they want to work with you, if they want to chat a bit deeper with you, how do they do that?
So we have a website. It's www.hunterhealing.com. That's the website. We also have an Instagram @_hunterhealing, and they can contact me through the website or via email, hunterhealing@gmail.com. Yeah, we work with people who are spiritually seeking to, and a lot of the people I've worked with who have really common contact with the truth of this sort of stuff. There's a lot of people around the country now who have had these types of experiences with us, which is great. So those people, if you're really truly interested in this sort of stuff, if it actually made you kind of feel something, when you notice something inside of yourself as we were talking, I encourage you to follow that, and even just feel free to just reach out and flick me an email. Like that's all good too. And then people who are suffering with chronic pain and chronic illness, we also have a branch of what we do working with them as well. So yeah, feel free just to even flick me an email just to say hi and have a chat, because I'm always open to have a conversation.
Cool.
Yeah.
I love that. And before you go, there's 3 questions that I ask every guest.
Oh, cool.
Which we will run through them. They're very, very straightforward. Some of them are more funny. So the first one, if you could tell your younger self one thing, what would it be?
It's all going to be okay. Yeah, that would be the thing. I'd be like, don't worry, man. It's all going to turn out,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. I love it. Number 2, what is your favorite animal?
Oh, favorite animal. I really like bears.
Okay.
Yeah. When I was in the States a number of years ago, we were going in this trail and I almost walk straight into a grizzly bear. And it was like face to face. I mean, it was like 20 meters away, but it was like the biggest animal I've ever come across. And we had a moment, dude. I was in deep reverence and awe of the majesty of this creature, and at the same time, absolute terror. And I was just like, oh my God. It's like everything from that moment on was up to the bear. But he was cool. We just stared at each other for a bit and then he wandered off. So bears, I like bears.
Bears, I love that. That's sick. The third one, and this is one I really love everyone to answer because everyone's perception is so different. What does strength mean to you?
Yeah. Strength. There's an easy answer to that from my point of view anyway. It's just having the moment to be authentic and honest. And that comes down to vulnerability, because people are so scared of being hurt. But in reality, true strength is to realize that you can't be hurt, that nothing can touch you. There's an image of the Indian god Hanuman, and he holds onto his rib cage and he pulls his rib cage open, exposing his heart. And to me, that's real strength, because he's saying, here's my heart. I'm giving you everything that I truly am. And in that, you can try and stab me in the heart if you want to, but it doesn't matter. You can't touch me, because the reality of what we are isn't actually touched by all these things that cause us pain. The reality of what we are is untouched, unchanging, stable, peaceful within the entire experience. So once we recognize that, then we'll find true strength.
There you go. There you have it. There you have it. So I'll put all the information that Mitch provided in the show notes. I will tag the Instagram and everything like that. You will be able to find him very easily if you go to my page as well. But I just want to say thank you very much for myself and for the people listening at home. That was amazing.
Thanks for having me, man.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Great chat.
Very, very nice.
Awesome.
If you've stuck around and hung out, listened to the whole thing, thank you very much. Have a fantastic day, and I'll catch you on the next one.